Nelson's Navy, Fact and Fiction, Part 5, Ships. In the age of sail, a ship was defined as a vessel with 3 masts. Here is an illustration of a 74-gun ship with a full suit of sails, from a period source. Each mast had 3 sections, mast, topmast, and topgallant mast, as is apparent on frigates and ships of the line. In Mr. Midshipman Hornblower, The Cargo of Rice, as HMS Indefatigable takes a French merchant ship, Captain Pellew demands, "What brig is that?" because a brig is not a ship. In nautical terms, a sloop was a single-masted vessel with fore and aft rig. The Royal Navy did not follow strictly nautical categories. In his orders, Jack Aubrey is appointed commander of His Majesty's sloop Sophie, although in nautical terms she is a brig. As Lieutenant Dillon explains to Dr. Maturin, she is regarded as a sloop because it is a commander's appointment. In Touch and Go, Richard Delancey commands the Merlin, a sloop of war rated 24. A brig or brigantine had 2 masts, with square-rigged foresails, and a fore and aft mainsail with a boom at its foot and square sails above. Hornblower takes charge of the prize brig Marie Galante with its cargo of rice. The fictional HMS Sophie and the real HMS Speedy were brigs, but the fictional Sophie has a quarterdeck. This was based on a Spanish brig, the Vencejo, captured in 1799. A snow was similar to a brig, except that it had a trysail mast just behind its main mast. This mast could be made from rope. It hoisted a gaff-headed sail with a loose foot. A hermaphrodite brig was a common type of trading vessel which was square-rigged on the foremast, the mainmast being rigged with a spanker and a gaff topsail. In The Surgeon's Mate, one such, a former Russian vessel, has its name changed to Humbug. Galley was a vessel propelled by oars, with as many as 20 a side, often with lateen masts. They feature in Mr. Midshipman Easy, where a galley is manned by convicts. In Master and Commander, the first convoy Jack Aubrey escorts is attacked by galleys. They also appear in Mr. Midshipman Hornblower and The 100 Days. A tartan, or tartane, had a relatively short hull with lateen sails on both masts. A huario was a small 2-masted, lateen-rigged coastal craft. Xebec was a hull type which had a distinctive overhanging bow and stern, a narrow floor and a broad beam. By the 1790s, some could change sail plan from fore and aft lateens to square-rigged. With a frigate hull, they became Xebec frigates, like El Garmo. A Polaker had 3 pole, one-piece masts, with lateen sails on fore and mizzen, but the main was square-rigged. The pole masts allowed the sails to be hoisted and the yards raised or lowered from the deck. A settee was a highly distinctive Eastern Mediterranean type with 2 masts and lateen sails. It could fly its jib sail between the peaks of the 2 lateen yards. A settee sail, also known as an Arab lateen, was a quadrilateral sail set on a lateen yard. A barca longa was a 2 or 3-masted lugger found on the coasts of Spain and Portugal. They were often used for fishing, freight, and carrying dispatches. Pinks came in northern and Mediterranean types. The feature common to both was the overhanging square stern or transom, also known as a pink stern. A speronare was a small Maltese merchant vessel used between Malta and Sicily. The name may have come from the spur or yard which held up the foresail. They were open except for a half-deck. Speronares feature in Mr. Midshipman Easy. Various northern types appear in The Surgeon's Mate as well as Master and Commander. A bean cod was a weatherly Portuguese fishing vessel with a single mast and a lateen stretching its entire length. Its curved stem bent inward. A cat was a strongly built bulk carrier with a narrow stern, projecting quarters, and a deep waist. In English trade they served as colliers. They usually had pole masts. There is a Norwegian cat in the Sophie's first convoy under Jack Aubrey. He is on the lookout for a cat in the Baltic when he sights the Minnie, a Danish privateer. A buss was a small vessel used by both English and Dutch in the North Sea fisheries. A cutter was a characteristic English fore and aft rig. It had a single gaff-rigged mast with a bowsprit which could be run in and out to carry more foresails. In the 1790s they could have square topsails. Ramage's first command is the cutter HMS Kathleen. Cutters also appear in Post Captain, a King's cutter, and as HMS Clam in the Commodore. The Witch of Endor cutter provides Hornblower with a spectacular means of escape in flying colours. Here are two prints of cutters by the French marine artist Jean-Jérôme Beaugien. A lugger had two masts, each in two sections, with characteristic lug sails. These had four sides, with the head 2/3 the length of the foot. Hornblower deters the attack of two luggers upon his convoy in A Ship of the Line. A chasse-marée was a fast northern French coastal fishing vessel with lug sails on up to 3 masts. The name means tide chaser, for delivery of a catch while it was still fresh. A chasse-marée appears in Lord Hornblower. A galliot was a northern, especially Dutch, fishing vessel with characteristic leaf-shaped lee-boards. A ketch was a two-masted vessel with main and mizzen masts. These were square-rigged and had gaff-headed fore and aft sails. Ketch rig was used for early bomb vessels armed with mortars for high-trajectory bombardment, but later bomb vessels were ship-rigged, so the ketch-rigged bomb vessels in the Commodore were rather old-fashioned. Corvette was the French term for a flush-decked, ship-rigged warship, smaller than a frigate, the equivalent of a Royal Navy ship sloop. Fictional examples include the Fancilla in Post Captain or the Papillon in Mr. Midshipman Hornblower, the Man Who Felt Queer. Here is a chart of ships' classification into rates. The rating of a ship was also relative to the number of guns she carried, for example Leopard 50. Ships could be down-rated, like Leopard, which became a transport ship in both fact and fiction. Guns meant cannon, also known as great guns. This expression goes back to the time of Henry VIII and the Mary Rose, when guns were either top guns or port pieces, also known as great guns. Top guns were lighter anti-personnel weapons like swivels, which could be mounted on the gunwales, the top of the side of the ship. The heavier, more powerful great guns had to be mounted on a truck or carriage on a lower deck. Sixth rates were the smallest rated or post ships, such as Atropos 22. Jack Aubrey's favourite command was the 6th rate HMS Surprise. She was a 28-gun ship, very much an 18th century frigate. She had been the French Unité, which was taken in 1796. Renamed Surprise, in 1799 her most famous exploit was to cut out the Hermione from Puerto Cabello, Venezuela, where her mutinous crew had taken her. The incident is referred to several times in the Aubrey-Maturin series, and also forms the basis of Ramage's mutiny. Ramage himself was the last surviving lieutenant of Sibylle 28. Nelson's first command was HMS Boreas, a 28-gun 6th rate. He commanded two more, Albemarle and Hinchinbrook. Collingwood succeeded Nelson into Hinchinbrook, which made him a post captain. The first ship Cochrane joined was HMS Hind 28. Once they are promoted to post captain, our heroes can command larger frigates of the 5th rate, such as Lively, Lydia, Boadicea, and Calypso. Indefatigable, which features in Mr. Midshipman Hornblower and Post Captain, began its life as a third-rate 64, but it was rasé, that is to say, a deck was removed, although it retained its 24-pounders. It was rated 44 and commissioned in 1794, after the glorious 1st of June battle, so it could not have intercepted the French grain convoy, but with other fifth-rates she intercepted the Droit de l'Homme in 1797 and the Spanish Flotta in 1804. Captain Edward Pellew was her captain from 1795 to 1799, in both fact and fiction. Another typical fifth-rate in both fact and fiction was HMS Shannon 38. Her highly trained crew under Captain Philip Brooke took USS Chesapeake off Boston. In so doing they restored the pride of the Royal Navy, which had been so hurt by the loss of the fifth-rates Guerriere, Macedonian, and Java to the superior American frigates Constitution and United States. With the USS President, the Americans had 3 ships which could outfight anything they could not outrun. Made from very hard white oak, their sides or scantlings were equal to those of the 74. Not only did they have 24-pounders on the upper deck, they were also double-banked with 42-pounder carronades on their spar decks, where ordinary frigates only had a gangway and beams. By 1793, fourth-rates were considered too weak to sail in the line of battle, but several did, most notably HMS Leander at the Nile. She arrived with the main body of the fleet and dropped anchor between Peuple Souverain and Franklin, where she could rake them without them being able to even return fire. On the 18th of August, as she was on her own, taking home news of the victory, she was caught off Crete by Le Généreux, one of the 2 French ships of the line which escaped from the Nile battle. 2 other fourth-rates, Adamant and Isis, were at the Battle of Camperdown, where they were more suitable for the shallow waters and shoals of the Dutch coast. In fiction, the horrible old leopard takes Jack and Stephen to Desolation Island. In both fact and fiction, she was notorious for stopping and firing into USS Chesapeake in 1807. Another fourth-rate, HMS Centurion, distinguished herself at Visakhapattan in 1804. The majority of ships of the line were third-rates, which carried 64, 74, or 80 guns. Raisonnable 64 was the first ship Nelson joined. She took part in the Battle of Copenhagen and appears in the Mauritius Command. Agamemnon 64 was the first ship of the line which Nelson himself commanded. He left her after he had been appointed Commodore in 1796, when he transferred his flag to Captain 74. Of the more common 74s, Richard Bolitho takes command of HMS Hyperion 74 in form line of battle. Hornblower has Sutherland and then Nonsuch as his flagship. Jack Aubrey has Worcester and later Bellona. The real HMS Bellona took part in the Battle of Copenhagen. First and second rates were 3-deckers. The additional deck gave them even more guns, and also made them suitable as flagships, because the extra space could accommodate a flag officer and his staff. Second rates were in effect cheaper first rates, but they tended to be slow and unweatherly, hence Hornblower and Sutherland having to rescue Admiral Leighton's flagship Pluto 98, a second rate, in a ship of the line. HMS London 98 was Admiral Parker's flagship at Copenhagen, and Sir John Beaulieu's Warren's when he took Marengo in 1806. The French preferred to use 2-decker 80s as flagships, such as Villeneuve's ill-fated Bucentaure, because they were more weatherly. The Royal Navy had 2 80s, Caesar and Foudroyant. The most famous first rate was HMS Victory 100. She was Admiral Jervis's flagship at Cape St. Vincent, and Nelson's at Trafalgar, where she was closely supported by the second-rate HMS Temeraire 98. Victory was as fast and as weatherly as the third rate. Although Victory has been in dry dock since 1922, she is still a commissioned ship of the Royal Navy. She can be visited as part of the National Museum of the Royal Navy. Part 6 of Nelson's Navy Fact and Fiction is a review of vessels and effects used in film and TV adaptations. Thank you for watching.